Well, hello, welcome to the premiere episode of the Big Ten Football Talk podcast. I am your host, Zach Guggenheim, and I'm excited to get us kicked off here. Just a little bit about me. I am a fan of Big Ten football. I'm actually a big Ohio State fan, and this is just something I wanted to try. So I'm excited. I love talking about college football, love talking about the Big Ten, and basically each week I'm going to go through the Big Ten slate of games, going to go through who I think is going to win and why. And we'll take a look at some other games across the landscape as well. But I thought for this episode, for this premiere episode, I would do three things. One is I would go through the Big Ten preview of 2021, kind of give you who I think is going to, who's going to win each division, where each team is going to slot in terms of the order in terms of their records. So we're going to go through the West and then the East. And then I'll give you the East and West winners and who's going to end up in Indianapolis. Are any of those teams going to end up in Indianapolis again for the playoffs, for the national championship game? And then we're going to go through week 0, which there is a Big Ten game happening in week 0. We have Nebraska playing at Illinois. That game was supposed to be in Ireland. We're going to cover that game. And then I'm going to give you my playoff picks at the end of this. So that's kind of what we're going to do. And we're just going to go right ahead in. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take the West Division first and kind of go through my order, 7 being the worst up to number 1 being the best, of who I think is going to win the West and who I think the best teams are and who the worst teams are. And so I'm going to start at 7. And I'll be honest, just as we start, there's going to be a couple surprises in here, probably some things that you wouldn't expect. I'm trying not to be a homer in any of these picks, just trying to analyze it as best as I can. So I'll start with last. I have Nebraska as the last place finisher in the West. Now, I know that probably sounds a little weird because there are teams like Illinois and Purdue that have not done very well recently. I think Nebraska, I have them 3-9 overall and 1-8 in the conference. And here's the problem that I see with Nebraska is, honestly, head coach Scott Frost can't get out of his own way. And so there's been a lot of speculation that someone inside the program is trying to get him fired, and fired in a way where they don't have to pay a buyout. I don't know how much fire there is to that smoke, but you can see, and I feel this way with programs in general, is if there's a lot of inner turmoil, even if they've recruited well over the past several years, you just kind of stop and say, I don't know if I want to touch them. And that's what I feel. I was looking up how many players have transferred out of the program just this past year. 22 players transferred out of their program this spring. 22. That's an entire recruiting cycle. That's how many players they lost. And just to give you a heads up, there's another team that has, I think, around 15 that transferred out. I'm not too high on that team either, and I'll get to them later in the episode here. But here's my concern with Nebraska. They lost 22 to the transfer portal. They lost another 5 to the NFL draft. None of those players got drafted. And they lost some really talented players. Wan'Dale Robinson, they're probably their most electric offensive playmaker, is gone. And so I don't see a lot of skill. Adrian Martinez, who's going to be their starting quarterback, he has been very inconsistent. And it just doesn't seem like that team has ever wanted to fight for head coach Scott Frost. And so I have them at 7. I have them winning 1 Big Ten game, and going and having 8 losses, 3-9 overall. And they're non-conference. They play Buffalo. I'm not even sure about Buffalo, to be honest. They play Oklahoma. That's going to be a blowout on Fox. And then they play, I think, Old Dominion in week 10 for their 10th game of the season. And so I have them winning that game. but it's going to be a rough stretch. The only Big Ten game I have them winning is Michigan State. They play Michigan State at Michigan State. I'm not very high on Michigan State, as you'll see later in the episode as well. But I have Nebraska at 7. The Illinois Fighting Illini I have at 6. I have them at 4-8, 2-7. I like Brett Bielema coming in. I think he knows the Big Ten. I think he has a good sense of how to build a program. But I think this is going to be a rough year. I think they might have a couple of upset wins just because Brandon Peters is a decent quarterback. And they do have a little bit of talent left over from the Lovie Smith era. But I think the West is surprisingly good this year. I'm really high on a number of teams in the West. So I have Illinois 4-8. Here's kind of the breakdown. I have them winning against Nebraska. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about that game coming up. They play Texas San Antonio in September 4th, and I think they'll win that game. They play at Virginia. I think that's a toss-up game. Virginia wasn't very good last year, but I just don't have a lot of confidence in Illinois being able to go on the road and win that game. And then I have them losing to Maryland, Purdue. They play Charlotte October 2nd. I think they'll win that one. And then I have them beating Rutgers in week 9. That is a home game for them. And then I have them losing every other game on their schedule. So I have them 4-8, 2-7 in the Big Ten. So I have them at 6. So this is one of my big surprises at number 5 is Wisconsin. Now Wisconsin is ranked 12. They're a preseason favorite to win the West. And I could be way off on this. I'm going a lot off of how they performed in 2020, combined with their recruiting. I am just not confident in Wisconsin this year. I know they're ranked 12th in the preseason poll. I think the AP poll has them 12. I am not confident that Wisconsin, even with Graham Mertz at quarterback, I'm not confident in their defense. I'm not confident in their offense, even with Jalen Berger as their tailback. I know they always produce good offensive lines, but I can't get over their bowl game against Wake Forest, where a mediocre Wake Forest team doubled them up in yardage. Wisconsin only had 260 yards of total offense in their bowl game against Wake Forest. And I know it was a bowl game, it was COVID, but everybody was on the Graham Mertz train and saying how great he was. And listen, he was amazing against Illinois. It was Illinois. I think Graham Mertz is going to be really good. I just think this is going to be a tough year. I could be completely wrong. Someone had made a comment on a message board about some of the defenders coming back from injury. And if that's the case, then great. Wisconsin could probably make their way up to win the division. I just don't like their chances, and I don't like their schedule. I have them going 6-6 and 4-5 in the conference. They play at home against Penn State. I think Penn State is going to be a lot better this year. I think they made some good offseason moves with coaching, getting Mike Yursich at offensive coordinator. They play Eastern. So I have them losing that game against Penn State. They play Eastern Michigan. That's a win. Then they play at home against Notre Dame. And I think Notre Dame has just better infrastructure and better talent. I don't think they're going to beat Notre Dame, even with Ian Book moving on. I just like Notre Dame better in that football game. They play Michigan at home, and I think that's a win. They play at Illinois. That's a win. They play Army at home. It's a win. And then I think they're going to really struggle down the stretch. I think they lose at Purdue. They lose to Iowa. They lose to Northwestern and to Minnesota. And so that gets them to 6-6 and 4-5 in the conference. 4, I have the boat rowers of Minnesota, the Golden Gophers. PJ Fleck And Minnesota, they beat Wisconsin last year. I think they beat them again this year. I have them 7-5, 4-5 in the conference with the tiebreaker over Wisconsin. They open hosting Ohio State. That is a tough game. I don't care how amped they are, and I don't care how big the boat they're rowing with. I don't think they beat the Buckeyes week 1. They play Miami of Ohio week 2. That's a win. They go on the road to play Colorado. I think in a really tricky game for them. I think they win that game. I think they beat Bowling Green, but then I have them losing 4 out of the next 5, finishing with a win at home against Wisconsin. So I have them 4th. 3rd, I have Northwestern. I think Pat Fitzgerald is one of the 2 best coaches in the Big Ten. They're underrated. Again, they were not ranked. Whenever Northwestern's not ranked, I think that they're going to do well. They have a transfer from South Carolina at quarterback in Ryan Helinski, who I think is going to be really good for them. And I have them going 9-3 with a 6-3 record in conference play. They play Michigan State, and they play Rutgers, and they play Michigan. I have them winning all 3 of their non-division games in the Big Ten, and I have them winning all their non-conference games. And so I think they will do really well this year. I think they'll come just a little short of getting to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game, but I really do like Northwestern this year. I think they're going to end ranked and get a decent bowl game. 2nd in the West, I have, this is my other big surprise here in the West, is Purdue. Typically I call them Perdon't, but I think they're really positioned well this year. They have 2 first-round picks, I think, and George Karlaftis and David Bell. I think they have a favorable schedule. They have a couple of easy non-conference games to start in Oregon State and UConn. They do have to play at Notre Dame. I have that as a loss. But then they play in their crossover games. They play Michigan State, and they play Indiana, and they play Ohio State. I think they lose to Ohio State because they're going on the road, but I think they will beat the other 2 cross-division games. I have them 9-3, 7-2 in the conference. And I think the big, the champion of the West Division is Iowa. I have Iowa at 11-1, 8-1 in the conference. Iowa's crossover games include Penn State and Penn State, Maryland, and Indiana. I think they go 2-1. I think their 1 loss is at home to Penn State. Like I said, I think I'm pretty high on Penn State, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I just think Iowa, they have the arguably the best center in college football in Tyler Lindenbaum. And I just think they're well built. They have a lot of experience on that team. One of the games I think early on that they're going to show that they're a legitimate team is they go on the road against Iowa State. And I think they win that game. I think it'll be close, but I think they have the defense to really shut down Bryce Hall. And I think it's going to be a really, really good season for Kirk Ferentz. And because it's Kirk Ferentz and because it's Iowa, he's probably going to win Coach of the Year, because anytime Iowa has 8 wins or more, they give Coach of the Year to the Big Ten to Kirk Ferentz. So Iowa, I have going to Indianapolis to face the East Division winner. Let me go through the East real quick. At 7, I have Michigan State. Michigan State is a major, major rebuild. They've had a lot of transfers. I don't know how much I believe in Mel Tucker. A lot of people do, but I think Mel Tucker is going to really struggle again this year. I think hopefully by year 3, year 4, they can start to rebuild that program. I have them going 1-11 overall and 0-9 in the Big Ten. Their 1 win coming to against Youngstown State. Number 6, I have Rutgers, and I really believe in Greg Schiano, I really believe in what he's doing. I think if they had a better schedule, I could see them getting bowl eligible, but their schedule is pretty rough. And so that I have them at 4-8 and 1-8 in the Big Ten. Just looking at their crossover games in the conference, they have to go to Northwestern, they have to go to Illinois, and they play Wisconsin at home. And I think Illinois might be a toss up. In fact, I think that's a game they could win. I think there's a couple of other winnable games on their schedule. So I would not be surprised if they got to bowl eligibility, but it is a tough schedule. So I have them 4-8, 1-8 in the conference. 5, this is not me being an Ohio State homer. And I say that off the bat. I'm an Ohio State guy. I have Michigan at 5, and I don't have them getting bowl eligible. I have them at 5-7, 3-6 in the conference. And part of the reason, and I talked about this with Nebraska, they've had so many players transfer, and they've had a lot of turmoil on that coaching staff. Even they brought in a couple of offensive coaches just to lose them. Either offensive, they were a position coach, I think, but they lost one of them to be the Buffalo head coach. And then I just don't like their quarterback situation. Cade McNamara has been named their starter. JJ McCarthy would probably be it'd be probably better to put him in. He's a higher ranked guy. He's a freshman. Let him take his lumps, but I don't believe in Cade McNamara. Aside from a triple overtime win against Rutgers, he struggled at times last year. Their schedule is awful. It's one of the hardest schedules in all of college football this year. They play Washington at home. I don't think there's any way they win that game. I think Washington's going to be really good this year. They go on the road to play Wisconsin. They have to play Northwestern at home, and they play Penn State away. They play Maryland away. And I don't believe in them. I don't believe that they can win those games. And so I don't like Michigan to do better than 5-7. I think they go 3-6 in the conference, with their wins in the conference being Rutgers, Nebraska, and Michigan State. So I have them at 5. At 4, I have Maryland. I'm really high on Maryland this year. I think they have a lot of good talent at key positions. I really like Talia Tagovailoa. I know he was inconsistent at times, but I think they have firepower that other Big Ten teams don't. And so they start with West Virginia. I think they win that game at home. I think their losses are going to be to Iowa. That's a tough cross-division game. I think they lose at Ohio State. And I think they lose to Indiana and Penn State. But I have them going 8-4, which is a huge step forward for Mike Locksley's crew. I have them 5-4 in the conference. Number 3, I have Indiana also at 8-4 and 5-4 in the conference. I really like the Hoosiers. I really like Tom Allen and what he's doing with that program, just bringing a real blue collar mentality to that program. Kind of feels reminiscent a little bit to Virginia Tech, and how they really built that program over the years. Their schedule is just really hard. You know, their first game is at Iowa. That is always a tough place to win. They have a really tricky game against Cincinnati. Cincinnati is ranked in the top 10. I do have them winning that football game, but they play at Penn State. They host Ohio State, and they play at Purdue. And I don't see them getting better than 8-4. And so I have them 8-4, 5-4 in the conference. They win the tiebreak against Maryland. Number 2, I have Penn State. Penn State, I think they let Indiana beat them 5 times last year. If I'm being honest, I think Indiana, that loss and then losing to Ohio State, it really just derailed their whole season. I have them 11-1, 8-1 in the conference. I think they beat Wisconsin on the road. I think they beat Auburn at home. I know that's going to be a real tricky game. I kind of went back and forth on that one, wondered, okay, are they going to be able to do this? I think they do beat Auburn. I'm not a believer in Bo Nix. I'm not a believer in their passing game. And I think they have enough on defense to really slow down Tank Bigsby. And so I like Penn State. I like Sean Clifford being coached by Mike Yurcich. I think that's going to be a really good change. And I think Sean Clifford is good enough to win every game on the schedule except one. And that is, again, not being a homer, the 12-0 Ohio State Buckeyes, who I think will go to Indianapolis. I have them winning every game on their schedule. I think, honestly, aside from Oregon, it's a pretty manageable schedule. Their cross-division games are Minnesota, Nebraska, and Purdue. I think Purdue is going to be tough, but it's at home. They get Penn State at home. They get Oregon at home. And so I have them 12-0, 9-0 in conference play. My one, I had considered whether they would go 10-2. But the reason why I didn't pick them to go 10-2 and instead 12-0, one is that the Oregon game, it has the potential to be a big time loss for Ohio State. And I think Oregon can completely win that game. But my concern for Oregon is that it's an early kick. And while I think their defense is legit on every level, Kayvon Thibodeau is probably going to be the number one pick in the draft, unless if it's a quarterback. He's a dynamite pass rusher. They have 5-star guys at linebacker. They have a really good secondary. But I'm not sold on their offense. I think they have pieces on offense, but I think they need offensive firepower to exploit Ohio State's weakness, which is, I think, the defensive secondary. They're young. There's a lot of good reports out of camp about that secondary starting to shore up, but I don't think Oregon has the pieces to exploit them on the back end. So I have Ohio State winning that game. And then the reason why I didn't pick a Big Ten loss is, quite honestly, all their road games I think are fairly easy. I think Minnesota, they'll beat comfortably. I think Michigan, they'll beat comfortably. Penn State and Purdue and Maryland who are all teams where I'm a little concerned about. They're all at home. And then Indiana, I just don't, I think Ohio State learned their lesson with Indiana. And I think if you go back and look at the Ohio State Indiana game, I think it was had a lot more to do with Ohio State almost losing the game than Indiana almost winning the game. And so that's my breakdown. So I have Ohio State and Iowa in the Big Ten championship game, and I have Ohio State beating Iowa in the Big Ten championship game as a revenge game from 2017, where Iowa just blew the doors off of them. And so that's my pick for the Big Ten championship game. If you agree or you disagree, feel free to put it down in the comments. Also, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, where I'm going to be doing this each week, talking about different teams in the for the Big Ten Football Talk podcast. Now, I'm just going to go real quick through the 0 week for the Big Ten. The only game on the schedule is Illinois and Nebraska. Nebraska is going to Illinois. I think Illinois has more stability. I think they probably have a bit more juice with Brett Bielema coming back. He knows the Big Ten. And while Nebraska, I think on paper, should win this game, I think Illinois is gonna win it. I think probably by a score of 27-17. I think it's gonna be a 10-point win for the Fighting Illini. I think Brandon Peters will make a couple of big plays, and I think Illinois will play more mistake-free, which I know sounds a bit odd because Illinois has been pretty turnover-prone over the last few years. But I think Nebraska is just in turmoil. I don't know who you throw the ball to. I don't know who their playmakers are going to be because of all the transfers. And so I like Illinois' trajectory. They're coming off fresh for a new coach, whereas everything seems like it's in turmoil for Nebraska. So I have Illinois 1-0. Obviously, next week, as week one of the college football season starts, I think that's going to be a big deal, or a lot more analysis for next week. So Illinois starts 1-0. Good for Brett Bielema, hopefully. Next week, what we'll do is I'll try to have the show up on Wednesday before the Thursday games. And I'll recap the Illinois-Nebraska game on that episode as well. And so you can talk back at me and say, what were you thinking? Why did you pick Illinois over Nebraska? So real quick, before we finish out the show, I want to go through my picks for the playoff and why. And again, I'm not trying to be a homer as I do this, but I already told you that I think Ohio State's going to be 13-0. I think they're going to be the number 1 seed, and I think they'll get in, and I'll show you. I'll try to explain my process here. I think Ohio State is the number 1 seed at 13-0. The number 2 seed I have is the SEC champion, undefeated Texas A&M. You might think Texas A&M, but I think they will be the SEC champ. I think they will go undefeated. And while I think that would merit some discussion for them to be the number 1 overall seed, I think actually part of the reason why I have them as the number 2 seed is I think the committee will try to do some finagling because they won't want a rematch of the SEC championship game, which is a little hint of who I think the number 4 seed is going to be. I think Texas A&M has the talent to get Bama. And I think Bama is I know every year they say, how can they replace all these starters? I think this is the year that they're going to be able to get them. Texas A&M has recruited well. I think their quarterback, his last name is King. I'm blanking on his first name right now. But he was a high level recruit. I think he's probably going to be an upgrade over Kellen Mond. I know certain analysts thought Kellen Mond could be a good NFL prospect. I just never believed in him that much. All respect to Kellen Mond. He was a good dude, 4-year starter at Texas A&M. I really, really like Texas A&M this year, and I have them going 13-0. Non-conference is fairly manageable, and I don't know how much I'm not too concerned about the SEC West for them. They do have to play LSU at the end of the season. Miles Brennan, I believe, is out for the season. That's their starting quarterback. So I'm not too crazy about their schedule other than Alabama. And I think Texas A&M goes undefeated. I think they're really good this year and gets the 2 seed. The 3 seed is Oklahoma. And I have them at 13-0 as well. And I honestly think you could interchange the top 3 seeds. I think Oklahoma is really good this year. I know they've struggled defensively over the years. As much as any Ohio State fan doesn't want to admit it, I think Alex Grinch has really done a good job of transforming that unit to be a formidable one. And I think Spencer Rattler is the real deal. I think he's a really, really talented quarterback. And I think he has just a ton of weapons on the outside. He's got great running backs. Their lines are great. And so I think they represent the Big 12 in the playoff. And I don't think they're going to get blown out this year. And then number 4, I have Georgia at 12-1 with their lone loss in the SEC championship game. I think Georgia, there's been some reports out of camp that Georgia's lost some key players. Otherwise, I actually probably would have had Georgia as the SEC champion. I do have them beating Clemson in their opener, and then the rest of the SEC East. I just don't know who challenges them. I don't think Florida can challenge them. Their cross division games aren't too tough, and so I think Georgia has an easier path, And while I do think Clemson can give them a run, I keep going back to that Ohio State Clemson game where Ohio State just ran roughshod on them, on their defense. And they did a good job of limiting Trevor Lawrence. And that's not to say that Clemson can't be better than that. But I think DJ Ungalale, that's a tough name to say. But DJ Ungalale, I think he's going to be really good. But I just don't know about the receivers. I know Justin Ross is coming back. How's he going to be coming back from his heart condition? How are those other receivers going to be? How are the running backs going to be without Travis Etienne? And how is their defense going to be? I'm just not sure. And so I like Georgia. I like their defense. And I think their quarterback, JT Daniels, is talented enough to get them through the regular season, to get them past Clemson. I think a couple of teams on the outside looking in, Alabama, obviously. Alabama's great, always. I think Washington will come out of the Pac-12, but I think the Pac-12 is going to cannibalize itself a little bit. I don't think there's one team that really stands out. And then I think Clemson's going to be left out looking in. Clemson's schedule is atrocious. It's the worst in Power 5. I believe they're ranked 70th out of all the Power 5, or out of every team in FBS. They're ranked 70th in terms of their strength of schedule. Their only ranked team is Georgia, and I don't think they'll play a ranked team until the end of the season in the ACC championship game, probably either UNC or Miami. And I don't think that's going to be enough to get over Georgia, who beat them. And honestly, I think if it doesn't go that way in the SEC, I think it's going to be hard for Clemson to get back into the mix, even if Georgia loses a couple. And what do you do with Alabama as a one-loss non-conference champ, or Notre Dame? I don't think Notre Dame's going to get there, but Clemson's got a tough road to get in the playoff. If they beat Georgia, I think they probably coast into it, because I don't think there's anyone in the ACC that can really challenge them. UNC, maybe they've got some pieces. Sam Howell is really great, but so again, my playoff picks: Ohio State 1, Texas A&M 2, Oklahoma 3, Georgia 4, and then in the championship game in Indianapolis, I have Ohio State playing Oklahoma for the national championship. I think those are going to be the two best teams in college football this year. I think they are more complete, or will end up being more complete. Although I think the team that's probably going to be knocking on the door at the end and really, really, really excellent is, of course, Alabama. But that's my preview for this season. Again, if you like the content, share, like, and subscribe. And I'll be back next week, and look forward to going through the season with you guys. Take care. God bless.